hand, they're unfortunately victims, so they wish to help them. We should see only the nisim and the flois, and we should see every yid should be protected completely, and there should be complete shalom. We shouldn't even have to have war altogether. Not even talk about it. Lam natseach mizmer leDavid. Yancha Adonai b'yoyim tzora. Yisagel Shem Elohei Yaakov. Yishlach Edecha mikodesh u'mitzion yisadeka. Yizker kol nuchesecha v'iloscha yidashna sela. Iten lecha chilvavecha v'chol atzoscha yamalu. Neranna b'shuasecha v'shem Eloheinu nidgel. Yamali Adonai kol mishalisecha. Ata Yudaitik, Yeshia Adonai Mashiach, Yanehu Mishmei Koche, Vigures Yesha Yemine, Eile Varechev, Eile Vasusim, Anachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nazkir, Ma Koru V'Nafogu, Anachnu Kamnu V'Nasedu, Adonai Yeshia, Hamelech Yaneinu V'Yem Koreinu. Okay, so let me look it up again. Why didn't I see it yesterday? So again, it's chapter Tes Vav. That's it. Chapter 15, and it's pasuk. No, it's chapter 17. Yep. Where is it? Running away from me. Here it is. Chapter 15. Anywhere. Yeah, chapter 7. 15, 12. Okay. Chapter 15, pasuk 12. And I know why, because they don't have it in this Chumash. I was looking at a different commentary. This is Yedison, no. In Talmud. And see that. No, None of this Chumash strange. Okay. What? I sort of, let me just see if it's any different here. That's well, base. Now we got the pasuk loose. That's what we base in some level zero. Yeah, here it says it. So I don't know. That's a different commentary. Whatever here it says. If you look in this Chumash, Yenis and Benazil, it says the 4 words that Avraham Avinu was overcome with a big, dark bear, fell over him, came over him. So each word represents one of the Golusin. The last one, fell over him. So he says that goes on Malchus Porus. Porus is Persia, which is Iran. That at the end of the Golas, they're going to fall. They'll never rise again. And from there, the Yidden will go out of Golas. So that's where we're holding. Okay. So I'm not altogether absent-minded. I did see it. Okay. Okay, so to continue, it says that Avraham Avinu was shown all the Golos into the future. And then it says the fourth one, which is Neifel, fall, is alluding to Paras, which is the Malchus of Persia, which we already had experience with them in the story of Haman. But he said that at the end of Golos, he will fall, never rise again, and from there, Yidden will go out of Golos. From that experience. Yeah. Okay, so that was another thing that I wanted to talk about. Are there any questions left from the discussion about Gimel Tammuz? So I think one of the main things I wanted to bring out was on a practical level. What does it mean when we say the Rebbe is here, the Rebbe is alive? It basically means, number one, which I explained the other day, is that to a person that believes that the Rebbe is present, practically it means that nothing changes in terms of the Rebbe's directive to me as an individual or to the general community. Whatever the Rebbe said before goes now. Now, even this, there's two ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it is like a person who's lacking true, Yirah Shamayim, or true is kashrus to the Rebbe, and therefore now that the Rebbe is not here physically, I'm not afraid, so I can do what I want. That's one level. But it can actually be explained, like I said the other day, I just mentioned it, on a deeper level. And that is that you do see that things change from generation to generation. In every generation, every Rebbe does things in a different way. Why? Because it's a new generation. There's a different need. There's different challenges, and there's a different goal. Like the Rebbe told us, we're in the seventh generation now. Our goal is to bring Mashiach, the Gashmias. So if you look at the way the Rebbe teaches us and guides us, it's different than things in times of the Alter Rebbe. More was demanded of a person to daven for hours, and demanded of a person to work on refinement of self, personal character traits. And today, the main avodah is to go out and teach Torah and to spread Yiddishkeit to other people. It's a different avodah. So and doesn't mean one is right, one is wrong, chas v'sholem. It means that was the avodah then, and this is the avodah now. And this would be compared to a person meeting someone in the summer and they're meeting again in the winter. And you say to them, how come in the summer when I met you, you weren't wearing a coat and you weren't wearing gloves and you weren't wearing a scarf and you weren't wearing anything to cover your ears, and now you're wearing a gloves and a scarf and covering your ears and this heavy coat? And the answer is because then it was summer and now it's winter. So in that time, this was the right thing. Now this is the right thing. So therefore, it might even enter a person's mind now that the passing of the Friedrich Rebbe came, so things change. So after Gimel Tammuz, things are also changed. In other words, not because I don't respect Chas v'Sholom what the Rebbe told me, but I'm thinking it's a different time now. Now it's different. But if a person sees and feels and understands that we're saying the Rebbe is here, and the Rebbe is present, and the Rebbe is with us, then that wouldn't even do another person. Then he knows that whatever was before is now, nothing has changed. And there's also another point. Even though, okay, let me first preface it by saying another thing. One of the places and the areas that gives us the most strength and guidance is very simple. Everything we do as a Chassidim, let's say it comes to doing Esrog and Lulav, there are different paths how to do it. We look at the Rebbe, and that's how we do it. When it comes to different customs regarding Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, regarding Tisha B'Av, regarding other days, we look at the Rebbe, and that's how we do it. we put on tefillin like the Rebbe. Everyone has their path, so it makes perfect sense that after an incident like Gimel Tamil, the Chassid says, let's look at the Rebbe. What did the Rebbe do? What did the Rebbe say? How did the Rebbe react after Yud Shvat? So the answer to that is that one of the things that the Rebbe said over and over and over was, number one, this point, that the Rebbe is here and the Rebbe is with us almost every week or every other week for the first year. The Rebbe would talk about this again, how the Rebbe is present and he's here. In one sikh, the Rebbe compared it to Yaakov Avinu. In one sikh, the Rebbe compared it to Moshe Rabbeinu. In one sikh, the Rebbe compared it to Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, all the things we spoke about. Another thing the Rebbe emphasized was that the Frierdiker Rebbe knew what's going to happen, and therefore he prepared us. And if we want to know what we need to do now, the place to look more than any place else is in the last thing that he told us, the last Fabrenim, the last Sichas. Before he stopped speaking, that's when he gave us the guidance how we should conduct ourselves now. So this is the one reason why the Rebbe is so much into Basiligani. Basiligani was the last minor, so every year the Rebbe built a whole palace of Basiligani. I showed you two volumes, which means every 20 years they would finish the Basiligani. So you have, the Frierdiker Rebbe said, one minor with 20 chapters, and the Rebbe made out of the 20 chapters 20 Maimorim, and then the second cycle is another almost 20 Maimorim. Why? Because this is the last Maimor that he said. But besides that, he went into other things. That if you want to know the answer to a question, look at what he said most recently. The Rebbe used the term last year or year and a half. And that is the guidance of what we need to do now. So one example of that is, people ask the Rebbe, do we still say the Frierdiker Rebbe's kapitel? The Frierdiker Rebbe, when Yud Shvat happened, he was saying kapitel Ayin. He was about to turn 70 years old. So the whole idea of a kapitel, it's a bracha to live long, and that's why you say, we're in the 70th year. But after Yud Shvat, is there any point in saying the kapitel? And if yes, should we say the same kapitel? Should we say the next kapitel? So the Rebbe said that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave the answer to the question. Where did he give the answer to the question? It says, take a look. What did he speak about last year, a few days before his birthday? It was Tes Tammuz, and a few days before the Frierdiker Rebbe's birthday. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said that a Yid should say an extra kapitel Tillim, that the schus of the Tillim should penetrate on him and penetrate in the pneumius. And the Rebbe said, why did he say that last year? Why not 2 years ago? Why not 3 years ago? Why did he definitely choose last year to speak about that? And the answer is because he wasn't just talking about saying any Tillim. He knew what's going to happen. This was before Yudis Tammuz, that of his birthday. And he knew that next year, the birthday, there'll be a question whether we should say his kapitel or not. So in this sikh, he was alluding to the fact that we should continue saying the next kapitel like every birthday, nothing changes. So why wasn't he more open? Why didn't he say it in a more open, explicit way? We should say openly what's going to happen, but at least maybe allude to it more. So the Rebbe told, no, a Rebbe cannot reveal things of this nature, and he gave an example. The example was that the Maggid Mizrich had a student who was one of the biggest students he had. His name was Aaron of Karlin. They're still today, Karlin Chassidim. And he spent time by the Rebbe met by the Maggid. Then he was ready to go home. He went into the Maggid's room to say goodbye. And when he left, the Maggid called in one of the students and said to him, you and your friends do everything you can to make him not go home, but don't tell him it's coming from me. Okay, so he started to talk to him, and they saw that he's determined to go home. They couldn't convince him. They couldn't say it's coming from the Rebbe, but they hinted that it's coming from the Rebbe. And he said, it couldn't be. I was just there. I said goodbye. The Rebbe didn't say a word to me. So he went in again. So the Rebbe bracha for his leaving. The Rebbe gave him a bracha, not a word about not leaving. And again, he called in the students, said, quickly catch him and make sure that he does not go home. This happened a few times. Finally, he went in, went again, went in again. Finally, he said, listen, you guys are, not being honest with me. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm going home. He went home. And unfortunately, he passed away. Of course, the students understood that had he not gone home, it wouldn't have happened. They're very broken. And they said to the Mezritcher Magid, why couldn't we just tell them directly, clearly it's coming from you? There would be no question. So he said something from last week's parsha. At the end of the parsha, when Hashem was talking to Miriam and Aaron and telling them the greatness of Moshe, it says the word L'chol Beisi Nemenu. He's trusted. What does it mean, trusted servant? When you talk about a king of flesh, trusted servant means he's not going to steal any gold, any silver. But what does trusted mean when you talk about Hashem and Moshe? And the answer, trusted also means another thing, that you can trust him that sensitive information, every government, every king has information which is sensitive. And this sensitive information is not allowed to leak out. So Moshe Rabbeinu knew all the information. He was up there. He saw what's going to happen to every single person, what's going to happen in the world, but he wasn't allowed to reveal it. And that's what it means, he's trusted. So the Mezritcher Magid said that there's things that he's not allowed to reveal. But he at least was able to do this, to tell them, to hint to him not to go. So the Rebbe said the Frierdiker Rebbe couldn't say it in an open way, but he hinted to us that next year, even though it'll be after Yud Shvat, we should say the next capital too. So this is also another very important thing, that we look constantly in the Rebbe's sigas. What did the Rebbe speak about most recently? And that's relevant now. And here's the difference. There are people that say, the Rebbe spoke about Mashiach. Mashiach is coming imminently. The Rebbe even speaks so openly about who Mashiach is, the Nasi Ader, and his name is Menachem, and all these open things. But then Gimel Tammuz happened. The Gimel Tammuz happened, so I guess things have changed. Based on the Rebbe's words, it's just the opposite. If this is what the Rebbe spoke about more recently, that means this is what we need to know for now. And therefore, a lot of the things that we live by and give us chayas and strength in this time is by looking at things that the Rebbe spoke about that in the last year or the last year and a half. And what did the Rebbe speak about? He spoke about all these things. Let's look at Gimel Tammuz. Here's Gimel Tammuz. The Sikh of Gimel Tammuz. When did the Rebbe speak about Gimel Tammuz? Exactly 1 year before. In other words, Tavshin Nun Aleph, Gimel Tammuz was on a Shabbos, Rebbe had a Fabrengen. And what was the Rebbe speaking about? The Rebbe said the following. I only have it in Yiddish, in Hebrew, I mean. If anyone wants, I can give it to you. This is part of it. This is only in Hebrew. Yeah, so there's. So the Rebbe starts off by saying, Gimel Tammuz is the day that the previous Rebbe was liberated from this jail called Shpalerka. This Shpalerka jail, by the way, was such a horrible place that people were petrified to walk even within 2 blocks of the place. Just, it was a frightening place. And he was freed, but on the condition that he must go to a city called Kostroma and be in exile there for 3 years. The second paragraph begins to say that at the time, nobody knew, is this a positive thing or is this a negative thing? Like what's this going to lead to? And which means initially people thought, okay, he's out of jail, but by the way, they also never knew that the Frierdiker Rebbe originally, the original verdict was, God forbid, Chas v'shalom, that he should be executed. So therefore, they didn't realize that sending him to 3 years exile was actually, his life was saved. So they thought maybe it's even worse. But after that, on Yud Beis Tammuz, when he came to Kostroma, a week later, on his birthday, and next day Yud Gimel Tammuz, he was given his papers that he's free. Does anyone know why we celebrate 2 days? The base Tammuz and Yud Gimel Tammuz? Right. Yud B'Shvat Tammuz was his birthday. Right. They told him on Yud B'Shvat Tammuz you're free, but it was a public holiday, and the office was closed, so we can't give you your legal documents that you're free. So come back tomorrow, and we'll give you the legal documents. That means that in essence he was freed on Yud B'Shvat Tammuz, but he actually went out on Yud Gimel Tammuz. And it's very interesting that Yud Tes Kislev had the same thing. That Alter Rebbe was informed, and they went out of jail Yud Tes Kislev, but he ended up in the house of Misnagid, and he was held hostage there for 3 hours. And when did he actually go out? On Chav Kislev. So we celebrate both days, Yud Tes Kislev and Chav Kislev. And the same happened to the Mitzvah Rebbe. He was informed on Tes Kislev that tomorrow is going out, but the day he went out was the next day. And it's interesting that we find the same thing with Yitzis Mitzrayim. There's a whole question in Gemara about when we have to do certain things. So some opinions say that we should do it at night, and some say by the day, the 15th by day, was the machlokes, because the Gula was really at night. Once the Makkah's Bechoros took place, they were free. And the other opinion said, but they didn't go out of Mitzrayim until daytime. The Gemara concludes that the actual freedom of Golus was at night, but they didn't leave until the next day. So therefore, we make the Seder at night, and the Yontif begins at night, of course. But it's not only because of that, but because that's actually the time of the Geula. But technically and physically, we left 12 hours later. We left by day. Anyway, so this is the same. So the Rebbe said these words. I underlined it here. The Rebbe said, and therefore, once the Frierdiker Rebbe went out of jail on the 12th of Tammuz, which was a week later, we looked back in retrospect and we saw that Gimel Tammuz wasn't a bad day. It was actually the beginning of his Geula. It was the first stage. Afterwards, Noida became known that his going to Kastamah was instead of a different punishment, which was the opposite of life. Rahman al-Islam. Turn the page. And that's something which was, of course, his life was in danger. And that would not only endanger his life, it would endanger all the work of spreading Torah and spreading Yiddishkeit. And this was a much lighter punishment. But eventually it led to Gimel Tammuz, and that's why this is considered Yom HaGeula. It's very interesting. In the Hayom Yom, it says that in your base Tammuz, Gimel Tammuz, you don't say Tachman. What about Gimel Tammuz? You say Tachman Gimel Tammuz or not? In Hayom Yom, it doesn't say, not to say why, because Gimel Tammuz, he didn't really get free yet. He went out of jail, but he went to the city of exile. Nevertheless, the Rebbe, in a number of times, actually make Farbrengen on Gimel Tammuz, and he said Gimel Tammuz is really a Yontif, because on that day, the Frierdiker Rebbe's verdict was changed from the opposite of life to exile. And in some ways, Gimel Tammuz is even a bigger Yontif than Yud B'Shvat Tammuz, the Rebbe said. So what about Tachlis? Do we say Tachlis or not? So in those days, when people asked the Rebbe, a few people got an answer. It depends on on your hergish, how you feel. If you feel Goludik on that day, then you don't say Tachlis. In other words, the Gimel Tammuz day from the start was a little bit of a confusing day. Is it a yontif? Is it not a yontif? Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? By the way, there was another reason why some people were afraid of the Frierdiker Rebbe going out of jail, going to the city. The Gashmi is the natural Alpiteva reason why they freed him from jail, because there was tremendous pressure, political pressure, from Latvia, America, and a few other places that put pressure on Russia, who at that time wanted to have a good relationship with this country, that they should free the Frierdiker Rebbe. There was a bunch of people here in America that went to Washington, and they had people who put pressure on Russia, and all that worked. So there was a concern that maybe, the they're not going to do anything. They're going to make them go free, but they can make things happen. Like, oh, there could be accidents. Other things can happen, which means chas v'shalom, they'll do what they wanted to do, but not in an official way that they could be blamed as doing something, but an accident happened. So it wasn't really, it wasn't known whether it's such a good idea that he went out of the jail. But at the end, the Rebbe says, what happened later proved that this was actually the beginning of Geula. And the Rebbe asked a question. Anyway, so based on that, by the way, this is the same thing Chassidim feel about Gimel Tammuz. Gimel Tammuz was the day that was definitely a dark day. In a way, the darkest day for Chassidim, that the Rebbe was not here. On the other hand, what did the Rebbe say about Gimel Tammuz just 1 year before? That at the moment, it looked like something which is negative. But later, when the good things happened, we looked back and we saw that this was just one of the stages, one of the phases of bringing Geula. And that's the way we look at this as well. That this is something which we went through in order to lead to Geula, even though we don't understand why was it necessary and so on. But that's the way we look at it. But everybody asked the question: if Hashem is already making a miracle, why did He make a miracle on Gimel Tammuz that He went out and then He went to a city of exile? Why didn't He just make the miracle that He went out and went home? The Rebbe says there's a similar question about the original Gimel Tammuz. Mentioned yesterday, the original Gimel Tammuz was that there was a war, and Yeshua saw that they're about to defeat the enemy, but it's nighttime, and at nighttime they won't be able to continue fighting, and that'll give the enemy a chance to somehow strengthen themselves or even get away. So he performed this miracle that the sun never went down. The sun didn't go down. So the Rebbe said, so what did Hashem do? There's a war, and you need to defeat the war. Hashem wants them to defeat the enemy. So what does He do? He makes a miracle that the sun doesn't go down so they can continue fighting and defeat the enemy. If He's making a miracle already, make a miracle that they'll be defeated before the night and finished. Just like He did in Mitzrayim, The Eibishter could do things in a way that any kind of miracle. So He could have made a miracle so why did He make a miracle that the sun should continue and the fighting should continue, and then they'll finish the war? Just do the whole job completely. And then the Rebbe gave a third example of a similar question. That was Parshas Korach, something with that Parsha. So what was the Rebbe's answer? The Rebbe's answer was, here we see that even when Hashem performs a miracle, which is supernatural, transcends nature, nevertheless, Hashem still wants it, to a certain extent, to be channeled through the order of nature. In other words, ultimately, the whole purpose of the world is to create a Gashmic world, a natural world, a world which is operating according to nature, and in this Gashmic world, to transform it and make it godly. So that's the reason why B'chlal there aren't miracles every single move you make. Everything is apiteva, everything is natural, because nature conceals godliness. But then there are times when Hashem performs a miracle. Even when He performs a miracle, which is clearly, openly supernatural, He still makes it in a way that some way it's still connected to nature. And there's some sort of an order to it. To give an example of Kriyas Yamsuf. How did Kriyas Yamsuf take place? This is always pointed as the biggest miracle that ever happened, Kriyas Yamsuf. But what does it say in Chumash? Hashem made a wind blow all night long, and the wind blew so strong that it lifted the water, it made it stand, and the water split, and they were able to cross. And what if there wouldn't be a wind? Couldn't Hashem just make the water stand up and finish? Anyway, it's a miracle. And the answer is the same thing. It's a miracle, but Hashem still wanted it to have some sort of semblance. And by the way, it gives room. I read an article once where scientists made some sort of an experiment to show, that it's possible when there's a very strong wind that it could split the water. So maybe just when they were standing there, the wind came so strong that it split the water. It wasn't a miracle. It was something of a natural phenomenon. It wasn't a miracle. It happened when the Jews had to leave, and after they left, that's when the wind stopped, But it means that it was done in such a way. It reminds me of a story I heard from my grandfather that the Baal Shem Tov naturally had a lot of people who were opposing him. And the Chassidim used to have these debates with the other people. And the Hashem was a tzaddik, and they would say this. One time they said to them, look, just watch the Baal Shem Tov when he teaches and he says Torah. His face is on fire. His face is literally shining, red, fire coming out. You see that he's in a different world. They said, nah, come on. You know, when people drink a lot of wine, the face turns red. So they played the whole thing down. It's from drinking a lot of wine. So one of the Chassidim came to the Baal Shem Tov and said, is it possible maybe to take the wine off the table? Because it's making them think what they think. So he said, no, the wine is going to stay on the table. He said, why? But it's just misleading them. So he said, the Eibishter wants that everything that we achieve should be through Bechira. We have free choice. So there has to be free choice. They can interpret it the way they want, or they can interpret it the way it is. The Hashem made that. That's what it means. Hashem does everything in the natural order. Here too, Hashem made that there should be a war. The sun should go down as a miracle. That's true. But at the same time, how did the victory take place in a natural way? That he still kept fighting, and he was able to defeat the enemy. The Rebbe says, standing over here, the Frierdiker Rebbe going out of jail was a miracle. The Eibishter wanted it to have some semblance of nature, so it followed stages. First, you were able to break them, that they should release him at least, God forbid, not execute, but to send him to the city of exile. And then he went to the city of exile. And then he was there for a few weeks, and then they said to release him. With the wine. Yeah. So this is also one of the things that we look at it and we say, if we're supposed to look at the last sichas that I ever spoke about, so this is the last sich on Gimel Tammuz, and the Rebbe referred to the day of Gimel Tammuz as Aschalta de Geula. This is the beginning of Geula, which means that even though what happened was the opposite of Geula, just exact opposite, that the Rebbe, who was doing so much to bring Geula, is no longer here. The Gashmis, we don't see him, we don't get dollars, we don't hear sichas, we don't get the encouragement. But it's like Gimel Tammuz, that initially when that happened, it was seen as something negative. But eventually we'll look back and we'll see that this is going to lead, that this is part of the process leading up to the actual Geula. And in this sikh also later at the end, the Rebbe said something very strong as well, that people, I don't think it's not on the sheet that I gave you because it's a long sikh and it's at the end of the sikh, but the Rebbe says people are asking, how can you talk about Mashiach? How is the rest of the world going to react to this kind of talking, and how can they accept it? And the answer is that the world is ready and people are ready, and he does have to say it and speak about it in a way that they could relate to it, and you'll see that not only they're ready to accept it, but the world and things in the world will actually help us in the process of bringing Mashiach sooner. That was the last thing that I ever spoke about when it came to Gimel Tammuz. So clearly, the Gimel Tammuz is not Chas v'Shalom, something which indicates that now we should let up on this Rebbe's mitzvah of Mashiach and bringing Mashiach, and that Mashiach coming imminently. On the contrary, this is what the Rebbe spoke about the last time that came to Gimel Tammuz. So clearly, this is what we need to talk about after the time of Gimel Tammuz, based on the Rebbe's own words. Of course, there's much more that can be talked about, but our time is limited. Anyway, this is the last class for today. L'shana haba Yerushalayim. We'll continue in Yerushalayim with learning more. We'll be located somewhere in Yerushalayim near the Beis HaMikdash. And we'll have classes at 8:30 in the morning, same thing. We'll be learning Torah Chadash and B'Yikli Teitzin. Okay. See you all tonight in Mirz Hashem.
Here, let's see. Oh, wow. Um, questions. Quando vai deixar falamos que é feliz, ela deu isso. Meu é também faz. Mas, né, me faz. When I had hoped the learning teacher. Me too, Lee, me too. He tried. Yeah. Been there, done that, you said. Yeah. That was a good class. That was a good class.